Well, let's bring in our panel here. Annika Green, former speechwriter for President George W. Bush, and David Carlucci, former New York State Senator. Annika, to you first. You've worked in White House under President Bush, as I said there. These palace intrigue stories, do they come around all the time, or is there something more significant here?
I mean, honestly, I think they are realizing, and Vance alluded to as much, Vice President Vance alluded to as much, that they made a mistake. I think they got a little too comfortable with the journalist. I think he had a point of view in mind. When you read the piece, he was not being generous. I think he was probably friendly. Some of the details that stuck out to me in the piece was that at one point, Susie Wiles was doing her laundry while she spoke to him. So to me, that indicates a level of comfort that is not wise to get to with a journalist. And I've been a journalist. There's a reason why people don't want to talk to us, unfortunately. Sometimes people don't realize how what they say may sound, which is why she's now saying, oh, you took me out of context.
David, what's your view? Are the Susie Wiles too trusting of the individual? Of course, we appeal to all people to talk to journalists all the time. It's a very sensible thing to do.
Yeah, I agree. Look, she claims they took it out of context, but she's not disagreeing with anything that's in the article. And I think it does highlight what many of us have been saying and what many of us believe, that it's a White House in chaos. She talks about how Vance is bent on conspiracy theories. She talks about the looniness of RFK Jr. The list goes on in terms of things we've even alluded to earlier in this program. She talks about regime change rather than actually controlling the flow of drugs. She hints at many of the things that have been a wink and a nod from the administration, from the president. But these are serious matters. And it means that if you're going for an objective, you have to be honest with Congress and the American public. And it seems that that's not what's happening. She talks about the tariffs hurting more than they expected. The list goes on, but I think it's not surprising to any of us that read that article in terms of what was said. Maybe the fact that she said it is surprising, but I think it was a lax environment and her guard was down.
Annika, just on that, some of the substance, I suppose, that was revealed in there, do you think that chimes with a ring of truth or not? Things like the many examples there that David gave, but also things like the description of Elon Musk and his approach to USAID. We've heard those kind of stories before. Do you believe them to be credible?
I think that many of the things we saw in the piece sounded like kind of one-offs, right? It sounded like there was some other point that she was making and then maybe said, so talking about Elon Musk, he was microdosing. And then you see in the parentheses that the author, Chris Whipple, said she's not personally aware of any microdosing, right? So that points to an understanding that it was a little bit of a kind of a toss-off comment, maybe a bit of a joke, and yet it got taken seriously. And I have to disagree with my co-panelists' characterization of this as a White House in chaos by just saying we remember how chaotic the first President Trump's term was in terms of, staffers coming in, coming out, people being fired. Anthony Scaramucci, I think he was the shortest term of an employee of the White House ever. I think it was, if I remember correctly, 10 days. And he got in trouble for talking to a journalist. So one would think that they would learn this lesson. And I think, conservative journalists often complain that when it comes to giving access, people get swayed into thinking, maybe this time this outlet that's been unfriendly or this journalist that's been unfriendly, they'll give me a fair shake. And then you see what happens. And it's not a flattering portrayal. And I think, like Vice President Vance said, they need to be careful who they talk to. And remember, you can't get too comfortable if you're on the record.
David, you were mentioning a chaotic White House there, but to Annika's point, we haven't seen the same personnel turnover that we saw in the first Trump administration, have we?
Sure, but that's not a way to rank chaos or success of the White House. We could look at, the fact that Susie Wiles says this is the best cabinet in the history of the United States. That is a laughable statement. The fact that she goes to those lengths. We've seen one mistake after the other. We could just watch your show and see how often Pete Hegseth puts his foot in his mouth or makes some unforgivable mistake that puts people's lives in harm's way.
And we'll
but the
be
president
talking.
and his
Sorry
administration
for
know they
cutting
can
you
never
off,
let up.
David. There. Sorry for cutting you off. We're just out of time here, but no doubt we will be talking about Pete Hegseth again tomorrow, as you mentioned there. Annika Green and David Carlucci, thank you for your time today. You're watching The Context USA on BBC News.